So going through my criminology textbook, I've on a few occasions come across the authors of this textbook referring to the fact that, suggestions have been made to the South African government, who happens to be the ANC. Suggestions have been made by various researchers, research groups, that there are specific ways that we can now start looking at and tackling the problem of crime, unemployment. And what is interesting is in the textbook they will give you reference points to the strategies that have been suggested by certain research groups, and that in this book here they admit and they say to you that these strategies were researched and were presented to the ANC government, of which the ANC government has up until this date done nothing to implement these solutions, which were calculated, they were looked at, they were seen as this will be an effective measurement, steps to be taken to alleviate crime, unemployment, and the government does nothing. They give reference here as well to the Reconstruction and Development Program, or else known as the RDP, and this was basically, this program was, supposed to implement changes in alleviating poverty, where health services were supposed to be introduced, housing, job creation, and they admit here in this book, which is very interesting, that the RDP was a complete flop from the beginning, because they say here that the funds that were allocated to be used were used for other things, or was taken, of course, by the people who were in such positions to take the money, and that it was, as they say here, was a recipe for failure, because in most cases the money that was set aside was wasted or used for other purposes. Now, and then they say here that since the ANC has been in power, it has made various attempts to relieving poverty, but we all know that this is not so, and that this is what we are being told as the public, but we know that there is no actual change. We know that the government is not doing what is best for all, and that those who are in power are using the power to basically enrich themselves. It's now about the elite in South Africa, and it is now basically the mentality has shifted from the white people being in power and becoming rich and having all the money in the country, and the shift of power has now to the black elite in the country. So to be told, oh, the government is doing what they're able to do, is nonsense. And this is what people are being told. Oh yes, we're still working on it, we're working at it. It's clear that they're not doing anything. And if I was a criminologist, going through this entire textbook, they kind of are making suggestions that the ANC government is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that even criminologists admit that they can see from doing a basic equation of 1 + 1 = 2 that the ANC government is not actually doing what they're supposed to be doing according to what they said they would do, according to the time span they said they were going to do it in. So if I was a criminologist, obviously these people can't say it, because then they'll end up getting fired, killed, hunted down, whatever the situation will be. But I would say outright as a criminologist that the governments who do not live up to what they said they're going to do, and who do not do what is best for all and implement structures and procedures and laws that actually change the way things work, those governments must be, laws must be implemented, and these governments must be held accountable. I mean, they can't put their hands up and say, oh, but there's so many factors and we can't help for this and we can't help for that. You are the government. If you cannot handle the responsibility that's been given to you as the government, then what you are implying is that you are not the government. You do not govern. You do not have what it takes to implement what needs to be done to actually make sure that people get educated, that an actual change occurs. I mean, the South African government is now at a point where they are so concerned with culture and religion and respecting culture and religion that they will allow rape and they will allow poverty as long as the people who are being abused and suffering by the hands of themselves, as long as they can have their culture and their customs. If you look at what's happening with HIV/AIDS, but people must be allowed to sleep around. It's our culture. You cannot stop people from having sex. It is our culture to, abuse animals, and to, treat animals as if they're nothing. It's the human culture. You're placing culture above life. And, things like rape in South Africa. When I was even in the police and I was in my one lecture, when we were studying and about law and all of that, in the one lecture, we were covering the topic of rape. And when we came across the different types of rape, the lecturer was reading with us through the textbook, and you got to marital rape. And immediately all the men, most of the men in the room, went like, what? And some of them started laughing, like, how can you place marital and rape in one sentence? And some of them were like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And the lecturer explained that if a husband forces his wife to have sex with him, that is marital rape. Wow, did that start a debate that these policemen, these were men who are supposed to uphold the law, and, if a crime commits, they're supposed to represent the laws that have been prescribed and go and open a case and make sure the case gets submitted. And, these are the people who were sitting in the room saying, no. And some of them were actually saying, my wife is my wife, and if I want sex, she must give it to me. And in my work in the police, I came across a few occasions where you would run into the cultural barrier, where I would be doing police work, and if a crime happened, and say, for example, I had to call the next person whose culture it was to allow such a thing, this person would come along, and I would say, please open a case here, and the person would say to me, why? And I would say, because a crime's been committed. No, and the people would laugh. And this in South Africa is a big problem, because now there's an extensive amount of justification with regards to religion and culture in South Africa, and that because a large amount of the police workforce are black, and this very much the cultural thing in the black culture is, animals are there for us to do with what we want. So if they come across a case where an animal's been abused, like dog fighting, unfortunately the mentality is, so what? And they'll walk away. If a woman's been abused, the tendency would be to kind of say to the husband, hey, stop hitting your wife, and they'll attempt to walk away. I've been in situations where I've had to insist on cases being opened and threatening my co-workers, saying, look, you will open this case because this person has committed a crime, because a situation will happen where the person who representing, remember, I'm now not targeting any specific race group, I'm giving you an example of that which the experiences that I've had in my own country, running into people's cultures. Doesn't matter if it's black, Indian, white, Muslim, it does not matter. I'm saying that the crimes that are being allowed due to culture and political means and money, it is all the same thing. It is being allowed. Life is being sold, and the abuse of life is being allowed so that people can get rich and so that people can have their religion. And that is unacceptable. So I would stand for an equality base, and I do stand for an equality based world system where every government is held accountable, and as humanity we are held accountable until we don't want religion and culture anymore, because we see that by belonging to a religion or a culture, you are abdicating self-responsibility and you are justifying and allowing the abuse of the planet, of each other, of the animal kingdom, of nature, and I would completely have all of that removed. If anything says, in the name of God you may, or if anybody says to you, look, in the Bible it was written that God created the animal and gave the animal to man, that kind of self-indulgent nonsense that was written, and you weren't there to meet the author and speak directly to the author and actually use common sense. I mean, I would have wanted to meet the author who wrote such a thing and said, look, are you mad? Are you mad that you would create such a planet where, I mean, you can just use common sense for yourself. You weren't there when these apparent scholars wrote the words of Jesus as Jesus said, because they interpreted it. And it's being used in abuse, and you can see it's being used in abuse. So let's develop a bit of basic common sense. Let's start naming the game and saying this is what a thing is, this is what it isn't, and start holding these governments, for example, accountable by first of all speaking up and saying, look, this is a crime. The current governments, they commit crimes because they are not doing what is best for all. They are pretending.